Welcome about Brown Geeks. You are now all officially Brown Geeks, whether you like it or not. My name is Amisha Upadhyaya. I'm the founder of Avaaz Media, and we are a community-driven platform that is going to be producing original content and showcasing content by other storytellers, all stories rooted in Asian mythology. So we are here to unbury stories that are not told in the mainstream, that never make it out of development purgatory, or that get to gatekeepers and then just get taken over by other people. So we think of ourselves as champions for Brown Geeks. And I welcome you all to our very first live event of Chai and Cocktails. Does everyone have a chai or cocktail? It is not mandatory. Christopher.
I got one. Got one right here.
Right there. So, great. Okay, great. And I'm going to, so thank you all for coming today, America, Suzie, Christopher. I'm going to hand it over to our animation producer, Dhugga.
And thank you, Amisha. Today's panel will largely focus on the ripple effect from Jenny Slate stepping away from her role in Big Mouth, and voiceover talent resigning and apologizing over roles where white actors played characters of color, leading the animation industry to rethink diversity in casting. Our panelists are an eclectic group of people ranging from industry professionals to members of our own Avaaz team. Today we have America Young. America has voiced several characters over the years, from Betty Cooper to Toralei Stripe to Howleen Wolf, and recently has been specializing in famous characters named Barbara. Barbie Roberts and Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl to be exact. Christopher Sean, known for being the first Asian American lead of a Star Wars franchise with Star Wars Resistance. Christopher was also the main bad guy for 2 seasons on Hawaii Five-0, and spent 4 years on Days of Our Lives and Lizzie Bennet Diaries. Christopher is currently the lead of DC's Gotham Knights as Nightwing. And then we have Suzie McGrath, most recently known for her voiceover roles as Tam in Star Wars Resistance, as well as Kimberly in Kobe Bryant's hit children's podcast, The Punies. And from the Avaaz team, we have writer and multimedia producer Tamara Syed, Avaaz co-founder and editor Ryan Thomas Riddle, and author, filmmaker, and Avaaz content creator Brianna da Silva. Thank you, everyone. We already kind of talked about what we were drinking, but specifically, what does everyone have right now?
Mine's called Humble Tea. I need a lot of that in my life because I'm so egocentric. No, just a clarification, I'm not the lead of Gotham Knights. There's the Bat family, the orphans. Them as a team collectively is the lead. Just want to throw that out there.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, it's all good. So yeah, I'm drinking air actually out of my Majin Buu Dragon Ball cup. So that's me.
You're drinking imaginary drink.
So good, so good. Nothing tastes better than skinny.
I did chai with a shot of Bailey's for the nerves.
Ooh.
It's not as great as it sounds.
Dude, like in like 20 minutes, you're gonna be loopy. All the questions are gonna be like, "Get it, girl? You know." What?
Before we jump into everything, just a quick heads up for those attending. If we have enough time at the end, Lohani, our producer, who's doing her magic in the background, will be fielding a Q&A portion. You can do the Q&A format on the webinar, as we'll be pulling questions from there and not the chat. But I guess we can kind of just jump into it.
I just want to say that I'm drinking tea.
I just finished my tea. I don't have it anymore.
I'm drinking tea and it's at the perfect temperature, so do excuse me while I sip away.
What kind of tea?
It's just a black tea with some pea milk, actually. It's like a PG Tips, very common in the UK tea brand. Just kind of classic, a classic kind of builder's type of tea.
I'm a fan.
I know. I like PG Tips.
Yeah.
That's what I had this morning. That's what I just finished.
Oh, really?
Oh, lovely. And I was watching a thing, just to go slightly off track. I was watching this this video where they tested lots of different known tea brands, and some of the tea bags are made out of plastic. Luckily, PG tips aren't. So they passed the test. So drink your tea with a clear conscience.
Okay. Good to know.
Good to know.
I did, in fact, defeat a Klingon for my batleth, for Rick, who asked. That was a question I
Today is
popped
a
up.
good day
I
to die.
answer. I did.
I guess we can kind of just jump into it. This one is for America, Suzie, and Christopher. We know that there's some crossover in terms of working together, America and Christopher with Gotham Knights, and then Suzie and Christopher with Star Wars Resistance. Could you guys walk us through what your experience was like in the audition process for both of these franchises? Anyone can go first. Start with you, Christopher, if that's okay.
Okay, in reference to, we can't really say too much about Gotham Knights because it is still a work in progress. However, Star Wars Resistance, currently nominated for a Primetime Emmy, Outstanding Children's Series.
Awesome.
Congratulations. That's all thanks to Suzie and maybe Dave Filoni, Justin Ridge, Athena Portillo, Brandon Allman. In reference to Star Wars Resistance, it was really interesting casting process because I got a call from my agent in New York saying, "Hey dude, Star Wars is calling for you. Who are you?" And I was like, "Wait, who are you?" And he's like, "I'm coming to LA to meet you, man." So we met up, and essentially we didn't know how large the role was going to be. I just knew I was auditioning for a Star Wars project because they're extremely NDA. There's a lot of red tape involved with Star Wars. But yeah, I mean, it was like maybe 3 or 4 auditions. I remember going in and doing a lot of chemistry reads and being just so like over the moon, elated, thinking, man, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't even care if I'm an extra on the show. Like, I'm so excited. But it turns out it was a lot bigger than what I thought. And Suzie and I got to run around all over Star Wars universe. It was a lot of fun. And the audition process was scary because you got like, maybe 7 people behind the mirror watching you perform. However, I made it a point that when I walked into the room, I knew every single person's name. So the first time they were like, "Okay, I'm Justin, I'm Brandon, I'm Athena, I'm Molly, and I was like, "Okay, cool." And they're like, "We don't expect you to remember all those." And then when I came to the callback, they were like, I said, "Hey Troy, hey Justin, hey Josh," and they were like, "Holy cow, give this man the job." I was like, yes. So I felt super confident going in. That was my experience with Star Wars.
What about you, Suzie?
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, I mean, it came up just like any other audition. So via my agent, I didn't have any special calls saying this is Star Wars or whatever. Quite on the contrary, I only really learnt that it was Star Wars because of the tiny little print at the bottom of the page, which before I guess I'd already submitted my audition without even seeing that it was Lucasfilm. So for me, I think that was significant because it was just like any other piece of copy that I would submit. And then knowing that, you do start to get a little more nervous and a little more hopeful. And yeah, and then after going to callbacks, going in for chemistry reads. I did actually first meet Christopher at a chemistry read, which was funny because we were kind of there, doing our thing and in a group, and people would come in and out, and I kind of stayed and continued reading with these different people. And Christopher was one of them, and I kind of left and he was like, "Congratulations." I saw him in the car park. He's like, "Congratulations." I'm like, "Congratulations? Okay." He seems nice, I hope, but probably not going to get it. And then on the first day, obviously we did get the job, and it was fun. It's a fun story to tell Christopher hanging out of his truck going, "Congratulations." I'm like, I haven't got the job.
I have a quick question. I'm fascinated by this chemistry read because I wouldn't think of voiceover talent having I have not been part of voiceover having chemistry reads. So how does that work, and how does that chemistry read sort of differ from live action chemistry reads?
Well, they're bringing you into the studio as you would record an episode, and so you're in person in a group recording with different actors, and I guess that's for them to hear the voices together and to see the chemistry between the characters, the actors, and just to assess from there, you know, who is likely to get the job or what combinations work best, I guess. I mean, that's just my opinion.
I agree with that. I'd say consider the idea that everybody has a different life story, and they bring all of those tools and experiences to the characters that they have. So if the line is "I love you," and you, let's say, Amisha, you say it with such conviction and love, and then I come in so angry and dark and brooding, and I say I love you so angrily, the chemistry between you and I may or may not mix well. So if an America came in and America was like loving as well, and you both said I love you to each other, and it fit, the chemistry was perfect, that would be your match, and you guys would be the couple that I would be waving to, saying congratulations out of my truck. You know, you guys would have the job. That'd be awesome.
And I bet it also has to do with vocal quality too, because some people have a very naturalistic way of performing and talking, and some people probably sound more like they belong on like Ren and Stimpy or Rugrats, you know. And if you have like somebody coming from Rugrats or somebody coming from something really extremely cartoony, and then somebody who's very straight and serious with the way the performance is, which is how your show is more like real performance and less cartoony animation. And so I would assume it's also making sure that you guys are on the same universe, specifically the Star Wars universe. But
I like how you did that.
you saw? Yeah, it was for Christopher's right. We can't really talk about, I don't know what we're allowed to talk about, so I always err on the side of not talking about it. But I will tell you, they didn't tell us what we were auditioning for. But I'm an avid Bat Universe fan. So I was reading the copy and I was like, are they trying to rip off Batman? Because this is totally a rip off of Batman. Can't you come up with your own stories? You're going to rip off Batman? Like, I kind of with a little bit of an attitude, like, come on, this is clearly. And so then to find out that's what it actually was made me laugh, because I was just like, yeah, okay, so then you nailed it. You weren't ripping it off. You nailed it exactly. But going into it, I didn't know, because they don't tell you. It's all so secretive.
For the three of you, since these are such huge franchises, what was that feeling like when you finally, like when they're like, all right, you got this, contract signed, you're in?
I still don't believe it. I still don't believe it.
Like, yeah, you just don't believe it. You're like, what? Oh my God, it's so, you know, it's so exciting. And that feeling just kind of never really goes away, because there's always something to look forward to each step of the way. And there's, you know, and just the people that you get to meet, being able to observe, you know, your peers, and just how it's all run it's just terribly interesting and terribly exciting. And you just, yeah, for me, I'm still like, what? Wow, I know, yeah.
Yeah, which she just did. That's the perfect representation of my internal monologue. It just feels so surreal. Like you're recording, like whenever we record, we turn to each other and go, oh my God, I just got to say the words out loud, blah, you know, or this is where we are right now, you guys. Like you just keep, it just doesn't feel real. It feels like your kids playing make-believe, like you did when you were a kid, when you pretended to be these characters. It's pretty awesome.
That's awesome. Christopher?
There's not much more to say outside of the fact that, you know, it's DC, it's Star Wars, it's franchises that have changed the world, and people still dress up as these characters. And if I were to say to anyone, do you know Batman? They absolutely. Who doesn't know Batman? Who doesn't know Star Wars? So it's pretty amazing to be to have my name alongside such large franchises and such great teams like America and Suzie and everyone involved with the creative process.
These are the franchises that raised us. You know,
yeah.
They raised us. We I don't remember a time in which they didn't exist. You know, and so to be part of it is pretty exceptional.
That's awesome.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
The recent changes in voice acting has, of course, brought on a lot of debate. In shows like Bob's Burgers and The Simpsons, a lot of men play women and vice versa. I've also heard the absurd argument of, does this mean humans can no longer play animals? So kind of jumping back into what the panel's all about, from the talent perspective, America, Suzie, and Christopher, what do all these changes mean to you, and what are your thoughts on everything that happened? And is this a slippery slope in any way?
It's an extremely slippery slope when it comes to men playing women, when it comes to men playing animals. I'm kidding. No, in reference to animals like BoJack Horseman, feel free to, it's a free open range, but the voiceover community is extremely tight knit, very, very small, very niche market. And it's very unbalanced in reference to men working and white people working and taking jobs. My friend is constantly getting voiceover auditions for black roles, and he's whiter than any white person I know. It's a very odd thing, but I think I will not take a role that is not Asian. If I'm not the right Asian, sometimes I step away from the role. If it's very specific to Japanese, even then I can't get the role because I'm not Japanese enough. So it's a very small like area of which I feel comfortable in taking on a role. But yeah, I don't want to jump. I'm sorry for jumping in. America, I know you got this one though.
I don't know that I do, because it is a slippery slope. And on camera, the only things that I ever auditioned for were maids and prostitutes. Those are the only thing I ever really went out for on-camera stuff because of the way I look. However, I do happen to sound like a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl from Malibu. And so for that reason, I can play a different role than how I look. So the wonderful thing about voiceover is that we can play roles for how we sound based on how, opposite from how we actually look. We're not tied down to the restrictions of how we look and the restrictions that go along with how we look, both good and bad. But in terms of, and in cartoons, there's a lot of non-human characters, and I feel like those are wide open. I mean, if you're gonna say a human being can't play a horse, then sure, have the horses audition and see what you get. Like, I think there's definitely, you can't, there's some things that are just ridiculous statements. Yeah, like if you're not gonna have a human being play an alien, then let's audition the aliens and see what you find. That's fine. Like if that's the argument you're gonna make, then you back that up with people to play that. But in terms of opening up the field of who can play what, in any given show, there's usually the token person who's not white. If we're talking about a human show, if we're not talking about animal show, if we're not talking about a fantasy show with ponies, there's usually the one or two characters that's token. That's the token representative, or there's the one person from each race that's representing that race. And that's it in the entire show. You'll have an entire cast and world that are usually white characters, and then you'll have your tokens. And so at the very least, let's cast those tokens with the people that they represent. At the very least, let's give those people jobs so they can have a sustainable acting career because they're being represented in that regard. But why not open up the representation that we see on camera in terms of the characters that you create, so that you're not dealing with just the tokens, that you have whole stories about different types of families and different types of cultures, and then open the casting up even more in that regard. So it's a tough thing, because you start getting to the place where you're saying, well, then if only the people who are of those races or cultures can play those tokens, then people of those races and cultures can't play the white characters. You run yourself into that dead end. That's not the conversation that we're having. The conversation is you have so few of those characters represented. Why not have people who can represent those characters, play those characters at the very least, and then open up the other characters in the rest of the conversation? So it is a slippery slope. I think it's a conversation that keeps going round and round and round. But to me, the answer is the people who are playing them, but more importantly, the characters that are seen. Mm-hmm. Because I play a blonde hair, blue-eyed girl from Malibu. And I'm thrilled that I get to play that character. I love her with all my heart. But I'd really love little girls to see more people with more of a variety, that little girls that look like them. And Mattel has been phenomenal with that in terms of the dolls that they've been releasing and the representation that they've been doing with that. And using Barbie as a segue into that, which is amazing. But if we have more content that has more of those characters, that's ultimately, I think, what the answer is.
Those are great points. Suzie, do you?
Yeah, it is a slippery slope, and it's going to be a slippery slope until it's an even playing field. And then in which case there's no slope to be had. Like for me, I'm not a terribly political person. I am an optimist, so I always like to kind of reflect on how far we have come, and we can't forget how far we have come, but there is still, you know, work to do. You know, in an ideal world, we would all be these artistic chameleons that can play anything, you know, whether that's a human, a different race, whatever, and artistically it would be acceptable. But unfortunately, that's not where we are. That's not where these systemic bias of kind of, it's so ingrained into our society and ingrained into the industry that until we kind of start to peel back those things, and, you know, starting with, like America said, was starting with letting those few characters be represented accurately, and then from there we can build and peel back layers and right the wrongs. And it's going to take drastic action to be able to, you know, people are going to have to give up their jobs, people are going to have to restructure, people are going to have to figure out how, you know, how to cast something that represents everybody, that makes, you know, space for you know, non-white people. So yeah, it's exciting. I think it is exciting that, you know, through the years I'm here representing not just a black, but a black mixed race person, a black mixed race gay woman, you know. And for me, if I was to listen to everything that society kind of throws at you, you'd be sitting here completely depressed. I don't know how I would get out of the bed in the morning. But, you know, that's not how I see myself. That's not who I am. That's not who I deep down. That's not, you know, I feel like I've been lucky because I've been brought up in such a way that I do have ambition, and I know that there is no limits to my ceiling. But, you know, again, we have to be here pushing back, fighting for what's right, fighting for ourselves, fighting for our lives, fighting for each other. Am I answering your question?
No, that was perfect. That was great. You know, Brianna, Tamara, Amisha, Ryan, you guys from the content creators and producer side, what about you? What are your thoughts on everything that happened?
Well, I just wanted to follow up on that and see if some of the instances that Sim mentioned, Suzie, America, and Christopher, whether that anything has changed. I don't know if you've been auditioning or some of your colleagues have been auditioning, and there's been any change in that process since that sort of slew of people apologizing or resigning or...
I was working on something recently, and I asked, because I noticed that the characters on screen were definitely more diverse than usual. And I said, hey, have you cast these characters yet? And they said, and didn't say anything. And I went, hey, so I have a list of people I can send you that are phenomenal actors who I think would be perfect for these specific roles that you have shown here. And they were like, send them over, please. Please send them over. Because the vicious cycle is that if the roles don't exist, then the actors can't exist because they can't survive. And therefore, then they're not there for when they actually want to cast them. Like that's the vicious. And then the argument that they say is, oh, I can't find somebody who is this race or this ethnicity or this culture because that talent doesn't exist. It's because they haven't been able to survive as artists because they haven't been cast. So I was able to send over this list, and it felt a little strange. And I would love to talk to you guys about this. It felt a little strange to write their race by their names. Because I know that they wanted to cast appropriately, but it still felt really wrong. to do it. But hopefully they got called, and hopefully they got a job out of it, and hopefully that's something that means that they can pay their rent this month. But I will say that the producer was like, yes, please send me your list of people, please. Did specifically ask me to put their race by their names.
That's encouraging.
But yes, please send them over, and hopefully they'll get the calls, and hopefully the work will come. So I think I really genuinely think people desperately want to do it. I think they just have to be reminded. And I have found that just asking questions has been the best. Oh, does this person have to be a white dude? Could this person be something else? Usually the answer is, oh yeah, totally. Usually that's the answer if you just ask the question, but I think people are also afraid to ask the question.
That's a good point, though. I think whenever you ask the question back, it forces someone to think about what they're actually doing, and then they're like, oh, wait, okay, I guess you're right.
Yeah, because they say write what you know, and if they're creating the content, they're going to write themselves or people that they know within their world, and if their world is small and monochromatic, then they might not write a certain way. And just by asking that question, it definitely, most of the time, I have very rarely gotten a no. I usually have gotten a, yeah, actually, yeah, that'd be cool. You know, but you do have to ask the question, and it is a little scary sometimes when you're in a precarious place yourself, as just being an actor, not necessarily being in a place of power, and asking that question, you know, but almost always there's been a positive response. And lately more than ever, I've had people reaching out to me now consistently asking me.
That's a really good way of, you know, taking charge and taking control of the situation from an actor's point, because sometimes it feels like there's not much, you're kind of the last sort of entity put into something, but yeah, that's really cool, America.
And you help them look good. I mean, that's ultimately what's happening, especially now, by saying, and even if they said, yeah, these roles are cast, you go, okay, well, I've got a list for you. If you're ever looking, I'm going to send it to you just in case. Because you make them look good, because now they can say that they reached out to these people and that they have a pool of diverse actors. If anyone ever asks them, they can say yes. So, and you as an actor know the talent, and you know the modest, amazing people that you love that will show up and work, and you can really vouch for them in a way that maybe a casting director doesn't even know them to that extent, because they haven't been in the what's that when you're in war and you're in the trenches? You've been in the trenches with them, so you've seen the true side of them. So I've really loved doing that, and hopefully people have gotten work from it.
This was something similar to what I was thinking while I was in the shower. But I was thinking about, you know, it doesn't just stop with, like, how do we create opportunity for people that haven't been in the trenches for long, you know, for new and upcoming talent that have so much to offer, but just don't even get the opportunity. So, and I don't know how they cast. I don't know if there's a percentage of characters that they open up for new talent, for people, you know, from, I don't know, but it was something that was weighing on my mind, because I'm like, it's not just, it doesn't just come down to race, it comes down to availability, it comes down to people that, you know, opportunity, and how do you cast that net a bit further.
And it's hard because there's a lot of money at risk. So the chances are, especially in voiceover where most people can play several characters, the chances are they stay with the safe bets. They have their safe list that they know that they can count on. And that they know will show up and do a great job, and they have a lot more flexibility in casting and using the same people over and over again, which is amazing for those people who just get called over and over again. But yeah, how do you open it up to new talent?
Well, that's what, Christopher, you were saying that, right? That it's a very small pool of people that all know each other, and that's good and bad, I'm sure.
I agree with that. Yeah, in my personal perspective, I've been in the business for 16, going on 17 years, and I've auditioned one time for a multi-ethnic Asian American, Japanese American, and I actually didn't get the audition. I was sent the email, and I slept through it, and then they rescheduled it, and I slept through it again. So I've never had the opportunity to actually audition for a Japanese American, which is silly. But more recently than not, I mean, with the Academy Awards now changing the standards for the way to win Best Picture, you have to have 30% LGBTQIA cast. You have to have more women. You have to have more diversity. Like those new rules that they're implementing, that's where change will begin. You're going to start to see people taking steps forward in diversity. And it's for us, being Japanese American, it's a big milestone. Very, very excited about that. Again, I've been doing this for 16 years, and typically every year I might have 1 or 2 pilot auditions at most. That's very bad. That's my opportunities. And for me to go into the room, I'm not just auditioning like for Days of Our Lives. I had to beat thousands of guys out, white, Latin American, black, not white, excuse me, Asian American, black, and Latin American. So they just brought in a boatload of people. So I remember going into the room, seeing all these black guys and all these Latin Americans. I was like, man, this must be a pretty big job. Thinking they're going for a different job. In reality, it came down to like 3 of each race. And they're like, do you speak Japanese? And I was like, yeah. And do you speak Cuban, like Mexican American and Spanish, whatever? So anyway, I see the pool is so small in reference to work for multi-ethnic, for even mono-ethnic. It's very low percentages of us on camera, having contract roles, having depth of character. So it's finally coming to a point now. I'm very excited to see what's coming for all of us who've been in the trenches, who've been trying to pave paths on common grounds. So again, I'm just super excited for what's to come. And I've been doing this for so long. I feel like, is this real? Is the opportunity finally happening? So it's really cool. Really, really cool.
Ryan, you had your hand up at some point.
Oh yeah. Well, I kind of wanted to circle back because I also wanted to get the opinion of our lovely voice talent here as well. That I think, like, even as a creator, as a writer, we're so trained and forced into the default, right? In fiction, we're trained into the default that it is cisgender white dude, right? That's just the default we've all been programmed with, whether it's reading books, watching cartoons, watching TV, movies. It's just the default that is, if you grow up, especially here in the States, that's your default image of what a hero is, right? A protagonist.
You've been reading my article.
I have been reading your article. I've been reading Sim's article too. And I think there's this, you have to fight that. And just for myself, what I try to do is I try to just include as many different backgrounds as I can in the writing, whether or not that ethnicity or cultural background plays into the story itself, but at least trying to build that representation of what the world actually is like, and to fight that instinct. Because I went through a writer's program that was very much training me that people that look like me, that had any sort of shade of coloring in their skin, was the other. That was all the literature we read. Those were all the movies we watched. And it was very much a culture that was obsessed with the other, but also had a problem with the other when made manifest in front of them. I got told once by a professor to embrace the other, which I found very insulting, because I grew up being the other, being, like Christopher and Suzie, I'm mixed. And you grow up already feeling not with one or the other. And I think that as a creator, I am constantly fighting that instinct to go to that default, because that's what I grew up with. And I wanted to pose this question to the voice talent. I think the other, it's almost like a chicken and the egg problem, right? You want to write the roles so that there can be people to fill those roles. But then there's also the other bigger problem is that the representation behind the scenes also has to change. It can't just be in front of the camera or the voices or what you actually see on screen. But I think there's a larger issue. And since you guys have more experience and have been longer in the industry than I have, I would be very fascinated to hear your perspective on how that can be also worked on and improved.
That's it. It always comes down to having allies, having people that are willing to see the real America, not you, America. I mean, in reference, we're all aware of what America is. America is a melting pot. It's not a definition, blonde hair, blue eye. It is all of us of all races that are immigrants came here. So Native Americans, that's America, you know, not blonde hair, blue eyes again. So people that are willing to say other, that are not sidekicks, that are not extras. The other shouldn't be that. The other should be the norm. And so we're all led to believe that unless you look a particular way, you're not attractive, or you're not cool, or you're only meant to be something less than. And that's a terrible psychological abuse that I believe. And I use that word because I do believe that growing up, I didn't have a role model on camera, on screen. I didn't have someone I could look up to and say, that's me, Bruce Lee. But I mean, can you name, how many mixed Asian Americans can you name off the top of your head on one hand, even, you know, on camera? There's a very, very small pool to pull from. And so I didn't have that growing up. Therefore, I always felt like an outsider. I never felt like I was part of a group, a part of a team. I always felt like the other. So until we do have allies, the people like America fighting for change, people like Anne from our Gotham Knights project, making the decision to make a Nightwing Asian American. People like, again, Dave Filoni wanting to have an Asian American actor part of his team. Like, until we have allies fighting in strong positions and allies writing those positions, right now is the time for change. Finally, we have the ability. There's no longer that tape saying, no, we can't. It has to be default white. Now, again, that tape is being ripped open, and we're able to start, I would say, continue, obviously, but now we have the ability to really start these opportunities for so many other people and so much change to happen.
I remember hearing a story about...
Sorry,
Suzie, go for it.
No, I was just going to say very quickly, just why can't we push the reset button? As humans, anyway, we always have to constantly assess and reassess and move with the times and work with what we've got. And so why can't we strip it down and, like, a building has to be redecorated or like us as people, we have to do that with our bodies. Like, why can't we do that with things, practices, workflows, things? They always have to be revisited, restructured. Like, why can't we do that?
Yeah, you always have to update. You always have to bring things back into... I remember hearing this story, and I believe it's true. It might be a complete just legend. But Shonda Rhimes, when she wrote Grey's Anatomy, she purposely didn't put race into her characters because she knew that the execs would probably be mostly white, and they would see themselves in the script. And she knew that if she put a race descriptor in there, they would question everyone. Why does this one have to be this? So she didn't put a description at all. Let them assume that the characters were all white characters. And then once they approved the script, she went and cast it the way she wanted to, which is at the time one of the most diverse shows on network television. And then once they saw the cast that she had in mind, they fell in love with the cast and decided it was undeniable. But that was one of the things where she used that unconscious bias in her favor, right? Because she knew that they would approve the script based on how it was because they would see themselves in it. And that by putting in that racial descriptor, they would negate it whether they meant to or not, whether they realized they were doing it or not. So she left that out and then cast it the way she wanted to, and then that's how Grey's Anatomy came out. But we every once in a while, like Suzie said, you stop, you look around and go, oh, things have changed. Okay, so why don't we meet that now? And that's one of the best things that has happened from COVID is that we've all had to stop and stop. And with stopping comes reevaluation and realizing that we've been rushing headlong without realizing what we were doing. And I think people are really looking into how much they can change and how they can make the world a better place. Maybe I'm just relentlessly optimistic, but I do think that people genuinely do want to make make better content and more diverse content.
And I want to say this also. I think that media is influence. I want to say that what you see on television, what you see in movies, that's a trend. That's what people want to be, right? So again, if you're other in life, you'll always be other. At work, you're not going to get the CEO position. You're going to get the other position, so it translates on all mediums. So I think it's very important now for opportunities, again, to continue to be created by amazing people like Ryan, content creators. Again, for us to have those opportunities will change, again, everything. The domino effect will begin as a butterfly effect, if you will. But again, we start to become CEOs. We start to become leaders. We start to become the mains, the leads, not just sidekicks. And in life, you start to feel like, cool, like I don't have to be less than. There's an old saying, Marianne Williamson, we're not afraid of the light within us. We're not afraid of the darkness within us. We're afraid of the light, but who am I not to shine, right? That quote.
Don't, but I do now. It's great.
But it's a much longer. However, essentially, it just says that the more that we shine, the more we give others the opportunity to shine. And who are we not to shine, being children of God? Who are we not to shine with childlike enthusiasm of life? Who are we not to? We're all meant to shine. So essentially, and I'm paraphrasing heavily, but in the end, it really is important for us to know that we are okay as ourselves. We are unique. You are all unique, and you are all special. Therefore, you all deserve an opportunity to shine.
I think that I love that. And I'm going to look that quote up. But I just keep thinking about the reframing of which stories are important to tell. And if you're not seeing your story up on the screen, then subconsciously you don't think your story is important to tell. And I keep thinking about the fact that like this hit me when I watched the movie This Is the End, which is hilarious. It's a freaking hilarious movie. But it's like 5 or 6 white dudes all telling jokes about their dicks or something, right? And it was so funny. Like it was such a good movie. I'm not down on the movie. But this movie is a wide blockbuster release for everyone. This is a movie that this is considered a movie for everyone. If it were 6 women, it would be a girls' movie. If it were 6 black guys, it would be a black movie. If it were 6 Asian guys, it would be an Asian. You know what I mean? Like, but 6 white dudes is a story for everyone.
Yeah,
And that's the reframing that I think we need to look at, because why is that a story for everyone, but 6 women isn't? And
can't even relate to that story because we're not in that club.
We're not in it. And so what does that do to your subconscious when your story is never important enough to be seen? When people who look like you and the stories of the people who look like you are never important enough to be told, how does that affect you? I mean, it's gotta, right? And that's kind of basically what Christopher is saying. It's gotta affect you if you're like, well, I think my story is important, but I've never seen my story, so maybe it's not.
It's funny. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's this assumption of universality where it's like there's like the default that Ryan was talking about. There's this certain very narrow, specific role that is considered like universal that everyone can relate to. And that doesn't actually make any sense. One, because that's, you're like, straight white guy. You can actually add a lot of different details to that default that we keep seeing over and over again. Isn't the most common person in the world, for one thing. In the world, white people are in the minority. And so it doesn't really make sense to make that universal, but it's also not, like, those aren't traits that make characters relatable, right? Like, the things that make a character relatable more has to do with the common humanity, the things that we fear, the things that we desire, the things that make us human, the emotions we experience. So if you show a character of any surface level attributes, with those kinds of universal traits, then people are going to like the character. That's what makes the story universal. When that is played up, anyway, in my opinion, as a writer.
Yeah, that was brilliant. That was the smart way of saying what I just said. Thank you.
Yeah, like I talked about this in the room before, Brian, Amisha, and Tamara and Bree. When I was younger and I used to write little white boys. That would be the main character, because I never saw myself. So I was just like, oh, my default was always this little white kid. time and time again. It wasn't until I got older when I started writing myself in it. But a question, oh, sorry, go ahead, Brian. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I actually want to piggyback off that because you just said something interesting. I also did that, and I also had to force myself growing up to see myself in my heroes, which were Captain Kirk and Superman, right? I had to implant myself into them. I mean, Clark Kent was why I became a journalist for a while. But I think like I did this, I wrote in in this program that I just talked about earlier, I wrote a character that was mixed Filipino, mixed, white. And the professor or the reader immediately said, oh, it's you're writing yourself. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because they assume that just because I have the same similar background, or I'm trying to tell us a story about someone who has my background, that automatically it's an avatar for me, right? Mm-hmm. It's just so weird that you keep, I'm not only am I fighting the urge to write white boys as the hero, but now I'm fighting the instinct that, oh no, I must be just doing autobiographical stuff because I'm writing a character who happens to share the same background as me.
I mean, this talk alone is creating opportunity as well, because I even feel empowered because a few of you spoke about being mixed race, and that's something that I struggle with as well. As being Arab Bangladeshi, it's like being almost like completely opposite races. And so when I'm writing, I'm thinking, how can I market this? I'm the South Asian character. Let me just lean into that. Or let me just lean into the Arab character. And it's like, why do I have to lean into one? Why don't I lean into both and create this like hybrid identity and create this new story? And I'm sure there's others, I mean, they're on this panel right now, who will resonate with like being that hyphenated character.
Yeah, in my experience, like a personal experience. Well, catching up on Ryan, you wrote a character that was mixed Filipino and American. And sadly, the first thought is, you're writing yourself? Wow. Like, how egocentric of you. Wow, how vain. And it's like, what if I wrote a white guy? Is it no longer vain because everyone can accept that? Like, no, you're writing a story of something you're familiar with, and that's how it should be.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's not like the deep part of what makes someone who they are. I mean, obviously, like, culture influences you and all those things. Those are part of who you are. But like, when it comes to like, if I'm thinking about if I'm writing a character that's like me, it's going to be like personality wise, like that's what I was going to think about. Like, if I'm writing self-insert fiction, it's going to be someone who acts like me, not someone who, looks like me, or someone who, likes the same people. It's like, that's not what makes someone who they are. And it's very like, it just flattens human beings when you think about them that way. And I think if people stop to think about it, they'll realize they don't really think that way most of the time. Like when you interact with human beings in the real world, you're not putting them in those same flat stereotypes necessarily. When you get to know a person, you know them as a person. But then when it's fiction, for some reason, we tend to operate in a different way. And we get stuck in these stereotypes that we just kind of like internalize and regurgitate over and over again. So you have to like break that cycle. You gotta be intentional about it, because otherwise it just kind of works on its own.
Yeah, I feel like the way to challenge that is, I'm not just creating a story for South Asians or just for Arabs. I'm creating a human story. For example, like if I'm writing a story about grief, that's something that we're all going to experience, that we all have experienced. And so when you focus on that, it goes across cultures. It's not just going to be, oh, that's a movie that's going to be just for South Asian or just going to be for women. Mm-hmm. And so that's like all about getting that writer's room more diverse, getting those gatekeepers, getting us in those positions. And just like America, I echo that sentiment of like, I'm an optimist as well. And I think we're on that path.
Yeah. Well, that was one of, when I started Avaaz, and Avaaz is a platform for Brown Geeks. And I remember I got so much pushback. Isn't Brown Geeks going to narrow you so much? And why is your mission statement based on mythology, Asian mythology, content dealing with Asian mythology? And I said, well, growing up, I felt like every definition that was given to an individual was too limiting, which is why ever since I was young, I've been a geek. I've been into sci-fi and fantasy and gaming because you just burst through all of it. You could be whoever you wanted in whatever time period, universe, whatever. And I was like, and then what you start realizing is that even those things which supposedly burst through all of those definitions are specific. So, like, I think there is a balance to be had between being, we are all the human race, you are all the humans, but there is specificity. Like how grief, for example, like in India, where my parents are from, there's actually professional grievers in some villages. They come and they grieve because you can't let it out. So they come in front of the house and wail. And if you had that in any other story, it's a very culturally specific thing, but it's also another way to talk about grief because they know that right after a loss, sometimes you can't communicate it. So someone comes and does it and guides you through it. And I thought that was so powerful. I was like, that's that, and you don't find that. And then when I started studying mythology from all over the world, so much things that are very culturally specific and yet speak of the best writers are very specific, actually, because within specificity you can find universality. And so what I'm trying to do is what we're all trying to do, this whole team, and it seems all three of you and all the talent that I've been talking to in front of and behind the camera is starting to reframe what is possible in a story. What is possible? How can we connect to each other in the most powerful way possible? And all these other things that we're putting in front of us are just barriers. Once you start saying someone is mixed race and someone's this and someone's that without looking at how they can impact the story in the most powerful way, because I assure you the reason why producers America are probably saying yes, send me the list, is because there are very few people who don't want their story to succeed. And if you say this voiceover talent, this on-camera talent, this writer is better than this one, is going to make you succeed, then I dare a producer to say no to that. The problem is trying to say, hey, here's where we all live. Here, here's the list. I'm going to give you the list. Start thinking outside of that, in terms of as not just as content creators, but as executives and as gatekeepers. Start thinking outside as like, what can I do to make this most powerful? So I really appreciate you for bringing up this. And you guys are all in franchises. And I also urge you to maybe not view it as a franchise, but as a mythology, as a universe. You guys are inhabiting universes and bringing them to life. And yes, on the business side, it's a franchise. But the reason it speaks to you is because you can be anything. When something doesn't exist in the real world, you can be anything. And that's why I think sci-fi and fantasy have been these like very fruitful places for all of you, for people to get. It's like low-hanging fruit, because then, you don't have to be like the five guys at the end of the world, you can be.
It's safe. It's safe.
Yeah.
I mean, in Star Trek, didn't they have to have an interspecial kiss before they could have an interracial kiss on television? Like, it's a safe place to experiment and push those boundaries, because this isn't real. This is fake. This is an alien and a human, oh, okay, you guys are okay with that. All right, so then let's go towards, and that's why sci-fi and fantasy is phenomenal, is because you can explore those issues in a safe place, because we're not talking about us, we're talking about them. We're talking
Right.
about issues.
And all aliens know English. It's amazing.
It's so clever.
There's actually a great question from the Q&A that I'd like to bring up real quick. Do you guys feel that representation has improved or not really?
After you.
Yes. Just look at the things that we're watching. I don't know about you, but like each platform, I stream a lot of television and movies and things, and very slowly, but steadily and surely, I am seeing more characters like myself. And I'm looking from an angle of a mixed race character or a black character or female character or gay character. And it's happening. I mean, can it happen quicker? Yes. Would I like to see more? Absolutely. Do I want to see better quality in certain aspects? Yes, would love to. But it's definitely better than when I was a kid and there was nothing to see. So yes from me.
After you, America.
Yeah. I think definitely. I remember when I first moved out here, my cousin emailed me, and she's part Haitian, and her son is 75% or whatever the percentage is. And she said, could you please, while you're out there, do because he loved comic books. Could you figure out a way to do a Black superhero? And when I moved out here, I was like, oh, I want that so badly for you. Miles Morales would be amazing. Black Panther would be incredible. I just don't, because at that point they weren't even doing superheroes. And I've had nothing to do with them doing the superheroes, but that has come out. Those have come out, and my cousin is just thrilled because now he has those comic books. He has those characters that he can look up to. And I was on a panel last week with women in motion capture, and we talked about how when we started doing motion capture in video games, we just got rescued a lot. Those were the roles we were playing. We were rescued a lot. We were like, the stunts that we had to do was being tied up, not being tied up, being dragged, not being dragged, like that. And over the last 10 years, the roles that we have played have been the rescuers and have been the teammates and have been that. So I definitely think it's increasing, and more people are working and conscious of it and aware of it. Could it happen faster? Sure. But the fact that it's happening and then the momentum is building is phenomenal. And then to answer I think it was Ryan who said about the behind the scenes, those numbers are increasing too. I mean, if you look at the numbers of directors for television last year, 50%, it used to be like 95% were white dudes. Last year it was like 50% were white guys and 50% were women and people of color. Now, the women and the people of color still had to share that 50%. And the white dudes still got the other 50%. And the number of guys, white dudes directing didn't go down, just the amount of content grew, right? So it was like 3% less guys were working, but the amount of content being made increased. But the new content, we're making concerted effort to hire diversity, both women and people of color. And so, yes, I think it's working because those are the people behind the camera. And then then those are the people who are going to, for random roles, be the ones who ask the questions. Well, does this person have to be white? Does this person have to be able-bodied? Could this person be could this be a person with a disability? Could this be somebody who's older? Could this be there's so many different ways that we are showing what the only interesting story to tell are, and instead bringing in different variety from age to ableist to racist and just asking those questions. And so I do see an improvement, and I projecting into the future see even a bigger one.
My answer is probably going to be about 45 minutes, so stay with me. No, I'm just kidding. No,
you extended to 12:15 just for everyone to know, so you're all good.
No, yes, I mean, look at America Young, look at Suzie McGrath, myself included. The people on this panel are a testament to the change. We are heading temple franchises, excuse me. You would not see that 5 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe even less. You wouldn't see that. The fact that we are here now talking about change in a public environment, not in privacy of our homes where we feel safe and we're allowed to complain. No, we're bolstering the change. We're the atmosphere of change, the positive change that is happening in entertainment. We're here and we're very excited about that. So the fact, again, that the three of us are talking about it, we are affirmations to that statement. Yes, change is happening, and yes, change is here. And you know what? Change is beautiful, huh? Look at the ladies. Look at you guys. I mean, come on. Sorry. Trying to make it light. You like the haircut? Hey, thanks, man. Thank you.
Amisha, Ryan, from kind of the writing perspective, what are your thoughts?
In terms of improvement, I think I think it's getting there. What's fascinating is that I think America brought up the original Star Trek and how they had to fight to get an interracial kiss and all that. But what's interesting is there's an actual NBC memo of that time where it said, hey, we want to push diversity and we want to have diverse casting hires. And one of the things I love about science fiction is that you're able to do that without hanging a lantern, and you're able to get away from these stereotypical stories, which I think we are now getting towards. We're not having like trans stories that are just highlighted by tragedy, or Black stories that are marred in just the everyday living in like poor criminal neighborhoods, right? We're getting away and trying to show other stories that exist out there, as opposed to just the dark, tragic ones or the stereotypical ones where we're either seen as criminals or the people making their beds, right? Or the victims, right? Those are generally the roles that, if you have a shade in your skin color, you get to kind of like get shifted. And I think we're seeing a lot more in the writing of shows that are showing these different stories of these different groups of people that are not necessarily the ones that we've been constantly shoved down our throat, in terms of this is how this ethnicity is, right? They live here, they do this, they do that. There's no and I think that's great to see. In terms of the opportunity, I'd like to think that it's going to continue to be more available, and I'd like to see more open doors in terms of the behind the scenes talent, because I think that's where, and especially at the higher levels, because I think that's where change is going to really be effective. And hopefully we can break this cycle of every 10 or so years where we talk about diversity and then we just create these diversity programs, and then that goes away, and then we're back in the same position where we're having to have this conversation again. So those were a lot of thoughts, and I don't know if they made sense. I did have an old fashioned as part of the cocktail part of this, so now we're at the end. So I'm not sure if I made any sense.
Yeah, you definitely made sense. And Ryan and I and Sim are all working on a horror podcast, and we're focusing on very specific stories from Filipino folklore with Aswangs and Muslim folklore with jinns. And so it's a horror podcast, by the way. It's going to be very scary. And, with these like cultural pieces that are ancient stories, I mean, first of all, we're carrying on these stories to be told. And second of all, it's very important for me to cast even those characters of like an Aswang or a Jinn in those cultures. It can even be argued that, well, they don't even have a race, but for me personally, I just feel more comfortable with having that race in the parentheses when I'm casting. And maybe in the future, we won't even have to do that. We would just have the people in our list, right? So like, oh, this person can just play this role, doesn't even have to be a specific race. And it just, like Ryan said, it just starts with us creating the opportunities and, us feeling like taking up space and feeling like we belong and empowering each other's stories as well.
Yeah, there's diversity, inclusion, acceptance. Diversity is having a seat at the table. Inclusion is being having a plate at the table, and acceptance is having a voice at the table.
There's another really great. Oh, sorry, Misha, go ahead.
Oh, I said I like that. I haven't heard that before.
I just made it up right now. No, I'm kidding. No, I heard it somewhere before. I heard.
He's good.
I think Suzie actually coined it. I just stole it from Suzie, actually.
He's just a vessel to what I communicate.
There's actually another great Q&A question that came in for the group. Have you ever questioned or commented on how a character you have portrayed or acted would respond to a situation with their racial background to the creator or writer? If so, how'd that go, or how would you have liked that to gone?
I guess just to touch up on that, on Days of Our Lives, I played a Japanese American baseball player who was closeted, who was coming out on the show. So I got to come out in Japanese on daytime, which is really cool. I was talking to my grandfather on the phone and coming out. And so in reference to culture, Japan, the stigma to being closeted is that it is taboo. It is it's not okay. It's wrong. And now historically, and I guess that goes against many cultures, but in reference to Japan, I know as a kid it was like that was bad. So for me, telling my parents, hey, I'm going to be playing a gay baseball player on TV, my dad military, my mom Japanese, it was kind of like I had my own coming out to them, and it was very uncomfortable, but it was eye-opening. And I was like, man, this is hard. This is a very hard story to tell. Now in doing it in Japanese, they had us try and translate. They had us translate the words from English to Japanese. So I was doing the best that I can to make it culturally appropriate. There's sometimes they're not words for some of the sayings in Japanese. So it was like hard to even tell that story. I was trying to relate it to the question. Now I don't know if this is gonna like go hand in hand, but in reference to how would my character have reacted if I were to stick to a Japanese choice? I think my character may have acted better, may have just been a stronger actor, you know? No, I'm kidding. I think it just comes down to, I actually called a lot of my friends that were Japanese. I was like, trying to figure out how do I properly say this, and how do I still be respectful to Japanese culture. I am kind of rambling at this point because I don't know if I can pull this back together. So I'm just going to say, thank you for your time. On to the next.
You didn't even have a cocktail, Christopher.
We only have 5 minutes left, so I will
You just had air.
You got Giddy on air.
Probably emotionally that air.
I want some of that air.
I will just completely shift gears here then, because we have 5 minutes left. And actually a question that I think has been coming up a lot is, how do you get started in this field if you want to? Can you audition with no experience? I think for a lot of people, it's the idea of what was your journey and how do you get started as voice actors? And it can go anyone, Sean, Suzie.
Okay.
No, I'm not talking.
They're saying that all roads lead to Rome, or there's more than one way to skin a cat and all of the other things. So for people, when you want something, you get to that at different points. So I personally, I studied drama. I went to university. I studied acting, and that's how I came into it. And I learned some of the skills to become a voice actor because of that. So things I would recommend for somebody if they wanted to get into it, I would say, definitely take some classes. Definitely, immerse yourself so you get to meet people, watch people, work out how to use the mic. It's just as important to know how to use a mic as it is a camera. I would say for me, one of the best things is warming up, being able to know your mouth and your instrument. So I really, really, really am very grateful for doing voice classes, vocal classes, technical voice things. So that you can warm up, because things like video games where you're screaming, you can damage yourself, irreparable damage. So being able to maybe do some, read some voice books, take some voice classes, learn how to use your mouth and your voice and your breath, most importantly. Not that any of that sounds like I do that, but that's, I think, is something that is very, very, very valuable for somebody that would be wanting to get into the business.
There's a website, I want to be a voiceoveractor.com, from D. Bradley Baker, who's one of the best in the business. And it is just chock full of advice and references and ways to start. And he's been doing this for a million years. It's something he upkeeps on his own on the website as a service for people. A lot of what Suzie just said is on there. So it's a great place to go to check out resources. There's also voiceover voice actor book by Tara Platt and Yuri Lowenthal, which is a very great comprehensive book. They're voice actors. But learning to act and being able to act is the first thing. I'm basically going to repeat what Suzie said. And then learning how to do it specifically for the mic, because everything is its own skill. Dance is its own, knowing how to use your body. Being on stage is different because you're expressing your story in a different way. If you're on camera, it's all in the face and the eyes, right? And in voiceover, it's all in the voice. And you need to learn how to transition one from the other, because you could have a phenomenal voiceover or phenomenal on-camera actor who is not good at voiceover, and vice versa. So that is a very specific skill. So learn that skill set. And then there's classes that you can take, that once you take the classes, you start getting mailing lists of auditions that are up. Like Verite, he's a casting director, but I think he also does Renee. He also does casting, but he also does classes. Donna Grilla is another place that does classes. There's a bunch of places that do classes, and you can do them online. A lot of them are doing them now in quarantine. So I would go to that website, iwanttobeavoiceoveractor.com by D. Bradley Baker, to start off as a launching point. And then also you can always tweet at me and I'll give you any of these links if you didn't have a chance to write them down.
Can I show you a couple of books that are really awesome that I use personally? Just very, very, very briefly. This is Speak with Distinction. That's a really good technical, like vocal voice book. And then this is just an acting one, really. Actions for an actor's thesaurus. I love this. Whenever I'm, just need to make a line work or just really want to be clear about my choices, I love to use that. And I've had this for years. Like, I've got my little name in there from school and stuff, but still, like, things that you go back to time and time again. Sorry about that, but yeah.
That was great. No, sorry.
I'd say they pretty much nailed everything in reference to how to become a voiceover actor. Now, when I was 3 years old, I knew, no, I'm kidding. I think the most important thing, we're all creative. We're all artists. Make strong choices, make bold choices. And then outside of creative, outside of artists, you need to understand the business aspect of it. It's one of the most important things, because again, anyone can have the perfect product, being an actor or a voiceover actor, and you're like refined in so many ways. However, if no one markets the product properly, it's never going to be bought. It's never going to be, no one's even going to know about it, right? So make sure that you're aware of how the industry works. Do research, look up on IMDb. And like America said, tweet America. Don't tweet me, because I'm not going to respond. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
Because I don't know the business aspect. I'm crap at promotion. I'm crap at all that. So yeah, definitely Christopher, because he's phenomenal at it.
Reach out on Instagram, reach out on different platforms, reach out to us. And I'm very open. I DM people back often. I spend hours a day. I'll get a couple chonklets thrown at me, like, pay attention. Sorry, baby, I love you. And then, but really, like, start researching the industry, start understanding how the industry works, who's doing what. Casting directors, there are websites, plenty. Casting About, IMDb Pro, LA Casting, Actors Access, the list goes on and on and on of the material that you can research to understand the flow and how you can implement yourself and ride that flow, baby.
That's actually a great segue, Christopher. Thank you everyone for being here. America, Christopher, Suzie, where can we find you guys? Do you want to plug your social media handles?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Suzie.McGrath.
Twitter and Instagram at my name.
Smart. I'm at Mr. Christopher Sean on Instagram and at Christopher Sean on Twitter and everything else.
Perfect. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. Thank you everyone again. Tamara, I believe you have a closing statement about something?
Yeah, just be sure to follow Avaaz Media on social media as we roll out all of our spooky horror content that I was talking about. We have the podcast coming out on Halloween, and then we have another Chai and Cocktails covering Asian mythology, and then one on stereotypes in horror films, so stay tuned.